Shalom Aleichem. Mishnah Yomi is continuing for Shushan Purim in the 10th chapter of Eiruvin, Mishnah Base. Now remember, Mishnah Aleph that we started on Purim, the first day of Purim itself, was someone who finds tefillin in the Rishus Rabim. Now Mishnah Base is actually a continuation of Mishnah Aleph. In the Gemara, there's no separation here. So we're going to see we're bringing more opinions about what to do with tefillin that are found in Rishus Rabim on Shabbos. Now where we ended up was if it's Shas Sakana, you should cover them up and just go about your business. So the sakana was if, for instance, the government made a decree against wearing tefillin. If they caught you with tefillin, he's in big trouble. So you cover them up until you can find a time after Shabbos to go and retrieve these tefillin without being caught by the government. Now it's interesting because there's a famous pasuk in the Megillah, Laihudim Haita Ora V'Simcha Sasan Vikar, and the Gemara in Megillah says Yikar, at the last word, was tefillin. They got their tefillin back. Now, where did the tefillin go? So the Farshim say, actually, Haman Rasha made a gezerah no tefillin. So Haman Rasha banned tefillin. So this Mishnah, right here at the beginning of 10th paragraph of Eiruvin, is nogeya to the time of Mordechai and Esther, when Haman had banned tefillin, and Baruch Hashem, we got them back again in the Purim story. So now we're in Mishnah Base. Anyways, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Notznan lechavero. He brings another option of what to do. He says you give them to your friend and your friend to his friend until you get to the outer courtyard, an enclosed area, and they would do a rabbinical transfer, like we learned about in the very first Mishnah in Shabbat, to get them inside. So what is he talking about? Again, he's talking about a shas sakana, but he's talking about a different sakana. The Gemara explains, we were talking about in Mishnah Aleph, was if the government banned tefillin, they don't want to see any Jews with tefillin. Now what Rabbi Shimon's talking about is if there's a different kind of sakana, like there might be bandits or robbers or things like this, or it's downtown Baltimore and you find tefillin on Shabbos, that kind of issue. So then the problem is not being seen by the government agents with tefillin, but the problem is let's get them out of here right now and not hang around in this place, which is dangerous. So you go and you get a bunch of your buddies together and you pass them one to another, and everyone's standing within 4 amot of one another. So you understand that a transfer in Rishut Rabim had to be at least 4 amot to be a biblical transfer. So we would get all these people together, so they're all passing from one to another, having a transfer that's less than 4 amot. So everyone's doing a rabbinical transfer, but it's allowed for the sake of saving these tefillin in a matzav where it's dangerous to hang around and wait for after Shabbos to save these tefillin. Now the Gemara brings another option of if there's only one person around and there's no one else to form a human chain with, then the one person could take the tefillin and move them less than 4 amot and then stop and rest, less than 4 amot, stop and rest without putting the tefillin down. And since all of his movements are less than 4 amot, again, it's a rabbinical transfer, but for the sake of saving the tefillin in a situation where it could be hazardous to hang out there, it would be allowed. The Rambam brings both of these options lehalacha. So the Mishnah continues with Rabbi Shimon's opinion. V'ken beno, also his son, if his child wandered out into Rishus Rabim on Shabbos, or a child was Mazel Tov born out in Rishus Rabim on Shabbos, they could form a human chain. Note no lechavero, he passes it to his friend. Chavero lechavero, afilu meya. Even if you need to get 100 guys, even if you need more than 100 people to play pass the baby into a courtyard, into a Rishus Yachid area, so you could take care of it appropriately. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he brings an even more makel, similar opinion. Noten adam chavit lechavero, you could give a barrel to your friend. Chavero lechavero afilu chutz l'tchum. They could keep forming a human chain and play past the barrel even outside of the tchum. And what he's talking about is a barrel that's hefker, that doesn't have an owner, because items that have an owner, they go after the tchum of the owner. And we're talking about bringing it to somebody. Remember, if somebody wandered out of the tchum, somebody got a little bit meshugana, and they wandered outside of the tchum, and they're stuck. And lamaisa, it's getting hot. They need something to drink, so you pass them the barrel. Hopefully it's not a barrel of wine left over from Purim. Hopefully you drank it all last night. But a barrel of water, you'd pass them on Shabbos. So Rabbi Yehuda has a permitted way to bring someone outside of the tchum by forming a human chain, their barrel of water. But Amru but the other sages said, Lo tachalach zay yotim rogli ba'alea. An item should not be able to go further than its owner. So what they're saying is a normal item follows the tchum Shabbos of its owner. So just because this barrel of water has no owner, it's hefker, it's ownerless, it shouldn't be able to go more than a normal owned, possessed item, just the 2,000 amos outside of the city. So we couldn't rely on it according to the other sages. Great, let's go on to Mishnah Gimel. Hayakure b'sefer aliskupa. He's reading his book on the porch, on the threshold. It could be a Megillah, and this golgol is sefer miyado. So one end rolled out of his hands. Golgolo etzlo. He can roll it back to himself. Now the Gemara brings a brisa that if it was 4 amos away, if the other end ended up a whole 4 amos away in the Rishus Harabim, he's not allowed rabbinically to roll it back to himself, even though he's still holding one end, because then there might be cases where a person drops the thing entirely, drops the whole Megillah, and the Megillah, part of the Megillah is 4 amos away in Rishus Harabim, and it'll come to do a biblical Isser, a biblical transference of moving that Megillah 4 amos in the Rishus Harabim. So if it got all the way 4 amos away, and some of these Megillot were quite long, as we saw yesterday, so that would be a problem. The Mishnah here continues, Hayakor Barosh Agog. He's reading up on his roof. You know, some people, they just sit up on the roof and do nothing, or they sit on the porch and they're just wasting time. But a Jew, a Yid reads scripture. A Yid reads his Mishnah, his Gemara, up on the roof or out on the porch. So he's reading on top of the roof, and at Galgal Sefer Miyado, and one end of the sefer rolled off the roof. As long as it's not within 10 tefachim, 10 hands breadths of the ground, he can roll it back up to him. So recall, as we learned in Shabbat, that Reshut Rabim, the airspace of Reshut Rabim, extends only 10 tefachim in the air. So above that is Makom Patur. So even if he wasn't even holding the sefer and it was sort of dangling off the roof, as long as it's not within the airspace of Reshut Rabim, he can roll it on back. But Misha Higia Lasar Tefachim, once it's within 10 tefach of the ground, Hochfo Al Katav, turn it upside down so the writing is face down and not getting bleached by the sun. It's not, it would be disrespectful to leave it, to leave Sfarim just hanging open, or to leave the scroll just hanging, a scripture side up in the sun. It's disrespectful. So you got to turn it over because you can't pull it back from Rishus Harabim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu ein mesulak min haaretz elekim lo machat. Rabbi Yehuda brings a makel opinion. Even if it's only a machat, only a needle from the ground, you could, as long as it's not resting on the ground, Rishus Harabim, you could still roll it back to yourself. The Bartanura seems to have a girsa kimelo chut, a thread's breadth from the ground. You can still roll it back, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu ba'aretz atzmo. He says even if one end of the scroll or the Megillah is resting on the Rishus Harabim, gololo etzlo, he could roll it back to him. She'ein locha davar mishum shvut, because there is nothing mishum shvut. Now, shvut is a rabbinical prohibition to protect us from doing, so we don't come to do an Isser Deraisa. So there's no shvut omed bifnei kitvei kodesh that prevents us from respecting the holy scriptures. So what Rabbi Shimon is saying is if you're still holding one end of the Megillah, then it hasn't completely come to rest in Rishus Harabim. So even though one end is Lamaisa on the ground, there's no biblical Isser involved here, only a rabbinical problem, because the rabbis say, let's make a gezerah once it's near the ground, in the airspace of Rishus Harabim or on the ground. A person might not realize that if he's not holding the other end of the Sefer or the Megillah, then mamish, he's doing an Isser Deraisa, a biblical prohibition, to roll it back up to him. So halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon. Shulchan Aruch actually brings Rabbi Yehuda, that as long as it's not touching the ground, it'd still be permitted to roll it back up. But the Mishnah Berurah does cite a dissenting opinion of the Gra. So tzorech iyon, ask your local posek about what to do when you're reading on the roof and half your Megillah falls close to the ground. In the meantime, Chag Sameach and be well.